Well, if you found me, I assume it's because you were looking for me. So please go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you can continue to get content. If you don't mind also liking this video, it drives the algorithm. Comment on there. Let me know where you're watching from, especially if you're outside of the Ohio Valley region. And then finally, if you find value in this commentary and teaching, then please share it. So I don't want to waste any more of your time because time is valuable. So I want to get right into it today and talk to you about the issue of stewardship. And I want to do so from the story of Joesph in the Old Testament, which you can find in the back half of Genesis. I'm going to be looking into Genesis 41, chapter 41 specifically, but his story unfolds over a number of chapters there, again, in the back portion of Genesis. So, and point you there, encourage you to get his whole story, but we're just looking at the portion that is relevant to our conversation today on stewardship, which I want to define stewardship for us before we get too deep into this. So just so that we understand what it is that I'm talking about. And that is managing our resources well. All right. That's how I am leaning in on what stewardship is and what I want to communicate about it today is managing our resources well. So the Pharaoh of Egypt was having some dreams. And Joesph was divinely enabled to interpret those dreams. The dreams consisted of 7 fat cows and 7 lean cows. Joesph was inspired by God to reveal to the Pharaoh of Egypt that the 7 fat cows would represent a time of abundance and plenty for 7 years. Whereas, conversely, the 7 lean cows, or emaciated cows, would represent 7 years of famine. And the Pharaoh of Egypt felt there was confirmation as Joesph was sharing with him this interpretation. And Pharaoh of Egypt thought not only was Joesph a discerning man, but he was a man that he wanted to manage the program that Pharaoh of Egypt was going to put into place. So that's what brings us to Genesis 41. And I'm going to begin reading at verse 33. Let me encourage you, get a paper Bible. You're going to want it. You're going to need it, okay? I love Bible apps and everything that's available to us digitally and electronically, but I still going to contend for a paper Bible. Again, chapter 41 of Genesis, verse 33 and forward of a New King James Version. Now, therefore, let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land to collect 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt in the 7 plentiful years, and let them gather all the food of those good years that are coming and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. Then that food shall be as a reserve for the land for the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land may not perish during the famine. So let me read that again, that the land may not perish during the famine. So the advice was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find such a one as this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joesph, insomuch as God has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and as wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall be ruled according to your word. Only in regard to the throne will I be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joesph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. And so there you have it. And so Joesph would then be in charge of this program of setting aside resources during the time of abundance, during the years of plenty, in preparation for the coming years of famine. Now, what does that have to do with me and you, and why am I sharing this on YouTube today? Well, it has to do with our own personal stewardship. So let me illustrate just practically. I'm kind of a pragmatic guy. I tend to think in terms of analogies, and so I'm going to just share a few of those practical illustrations to help us understand why this applies to us. I've known people over the years that have come into some abundance, whether that came in the form of a raise, whether that came in a form of a new job and a new salary, or just coming into some money in another way. And I've observed and I've watched those people take that opportunity to just go what a friend of mine calls hootie wild, right? They go out and they do those things that they've not been able to do. They take the big vacations. They go out and buy the big cars. They do all the stuff, right, that they have been longing for, yearning for, wanting to do, and just haven't been able to do it. And now they're seizing this opportunity in this time of their abundance to go out and accumulate these things. What happens is so often that they do those things and then they weren't prepared for that HVAC unit that was going to go out on them. And they've already spent up, or they've accounted for all the newfound resources. And now that those resources are depleted, they can't tend to or take care of those things that come up in an emergency. Things that we can't plan for necessarily, but we can prepare for. Let me say that again. Not everything in life can we necessarily plan for when it might happen, but we can certainly prepare for if it does happen. I hope you hear my heart in that, all right? No judgment today. I come to you from experience. I promise you that. And so I want to encourage us, all of us today, to think about stewardship during those years of plenty, so that we don't find ourselves in a hole when those unexpected, unplanned for things inevitably happen, because they happen to us all. Now, I know I'm going to get some pushback. Folks will say, well, now, Kevin, are you saying we should never splurge? Are you saying that we can't, do some of those things? No, of course not. It's not what I'm saying. But hear me when I say this. There's a difference between an occasional splurge and a new lifestyle adoption. All right? I feel like you can understand the difference there, right? There's a difference between splurging on some things every once in a while and adopting a full-blown lifestyle of doing things. Okay? So for instance, so you're saying I can't go get a Starbucks coffee anymore? No, of course that's not what I'm saying. But there's a difference between getting a Starbucks every single day and once or twice a week. Okay? And I'm not picking on Starbucks. I'm not picking on you. I'm just simply trying to find a way into some very practical things to help our wheels turn on this issue of stewardship and taking advantage of the blessings that God gives us in the times of abundance, to set some resources aside, whether that's in savings or however you choose to do that in prayer with the wisdom that God gives you, to have those funds available for those things that might happen to us. Or check this out, or for things that God may ask us to partner with Him in. So many people who, feel like they can't give to the furtherance of the kingdom because they don't have it available. Well, is it that they don't have it available, or that they have already accounted for or spent probably above and beyond their means and what they have, and therefore they are, in a position where they feel like that they can not be a contributor in a positive way? So take that into consideration today as we think about the grand program that the Pharaoh of Egypt put in place and put Joesph in charge of, based on the dreams that God gave him. In other words, God was trying to communicate to Pharaoh that, hey, there is going to be a shift that happens. There's a transition coming, And then Pharaoh had enough sense to seek out people that could give him some very practical advice and wisdom, and indeed a plan for navigating those times of famine, okay? And then because of that, Egypt was positioned to just navigate right through that, right? They were ready, they were prepared for when that time came. And then the whole world is knocking on their door, right? Coming and asking for help because they had not been prepared. They did not put things aside. They did not practice good stewardship of what God had given them and what God was providing them, that then they could, take advantage of when that time came. So listen, I'm advocating for us to be good stewards, all of us, of all the resources that God gives us. And particularly here in the Ohio Valley region of the tri-state area that I happen to live in and am a part of, because I believe that is definitely a piece of comprehensive revival, what I call comprehensive revival, which is not only revival in the church houses, but revival in family units, revival in communities, revival in whole cities, right? And one way that we can certainly achieve and accomplish that is by committing ourselves to a greater level of stewardship, right? Scrutinizing what God has given us, what we have at our fingertips, what we have available, and then figuring out what it is that we need to do with that. And instead of just flippantly spending, and I'm not saying that any one person, I'm not signaling out any one group, but I am saying that we are targeted as consumers, and there are nefarious forces out there after our money to keep us broke, after our resources to keep us in poverty. And last thing that I want to see is anybody struggling and without. So I am not asking you to do anything that I'm not applying to myself and trying to live as a better steward of the resources that God has put me in charge of, that God has given me to manage in my household and to partner with him in the kingdom of God that he is breaking in and bringing forth, and that is bearing fruit in my life. So there it is. All right. Pharaoh's dreams, Joseph's interpretation, and the application of this is a time for stewardship. And my friends, I believe that as we look at our headlines and as we discern the times that we live in, we could all agree our times call for biblical stewardship.